Today. We couldn't get Livy on her earlier class.
Hang on. Hello, Phong.
Hello.
So, thank you for taking a moment just to sit down and chat with me. And I know your daughter's having recess as we speak. So if we hear her in the background, that's what it is. We know. Um, I wanted to hear a little bit from you about your career progression. How did you get where you are today? I mean, I know you went to a fine law school, alma mater, Hastings. So, what were you thinking of when you started law school? What was your career goal?
The truth was, law school was never on my horizon. Ever since I was a young boy, I always thought I was going to be a doctor. I went to college thinking I was going to be a doctor. My first few years of college, I took all these science classes, did really well. I remember being on the dean's list the first couple of years. And I started working at a hospital. I worked at UC Davis Medical Center. I went to college at the University of California, Davis. Worked at
Okay.
the medical center.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember the first quarter I worked there, I was helping pediatric patients. And one of the kids I was working with ended up dying when I was working with them. They were at-risk young people who were staying at the hospital. Uh,
Hmm.
and then I said, maybe pediatrics isn't for me. And I went to work at the emergency room. I worked at Sutter downtown and Sutter, Sacramento, both hospitals. And I remember coming in one morning, and the nurse tech that was my supervisor saw me and said, "Gown up, kid." What do you mean gown up? Someone just walked in with flesh-eating bacteria. This was 1997,
Wow.
98.
Wow.
And I just thought, maybe this isn't for me.
Good.
But I did my job. I gowned up. I got the bleach, sprayed everything down, wiped everything down to make sure all the patients were safe. And that summer, I said, all right, doctors don't always have to work in hospitals. Maybe the hospital scene isn't for me. So I got a job working at the UC Davis Medical Center School of Medicine doing diabetic research. So I spent all summer and all of the next fall quarter doing diabetic research,
Hmm.
uh, the effects of various over-the-counter drugs on glucose meters. And our study actually got published. We found out things like Tylenol and vitamin C actually affect the little glucose readers for those who are diabetic. And it was a very important finding. Of course, the company that made Tylenol didn't like it, and tried to convince us not to publish it. But we ended up getting published. And what I learned from that experience was research was the most boring thing I could ever do in my life. And I hated that too.
All right.
Um, and so I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life at that point. It was my last year in college, and I was the elected student body president, so politics was always in my blood. And the former mayor, county supervisor for Yolo County, where Davis was at, her husband was the dean of the law school in Davis. And in one of our regular meetings, she said, have you ever considered going to law school? And I said, no, I've never really thought about it. It wasn't really on my horizon. She said, why don't you talk to my husband? I think law school would be good for you. You don't necessarily have to be a lawyer, but it would open more doors for you. So I spoke with Bruce Wolk, who was the dean of the law school at that time at Davis, King School of Law. And then I spoke with my parents, who was paying for my education, thankfully. And it was one of those situations where my dad said, look, if you're still in school, we'll help support you. But if you're out of school, you're on your own. Like, you got to take care of yourself. And so I thought, 3 more years of school doesn't sound that bad. So I took the law school admissions test. And I actually, on a percentage scale, I scored significantly lower than I did on MCAT for medical school. But I applied to law school that year, and almost all my applications were in late because I had decided to do it so late in the year. I applied to Davis, I applied to Hastings, and I applied to Boston and a couple of other schools. And I told the dean of the Davis Law School that I knew I wanted to be in a different environment. I loved my time at Davis, but I grew up in the suburbs, going to school in a more suburban, rural area. I wanted to be in an urban environment. And so I got admitted into Hastings and Boston, and I flew out to Boston loved the experience, but then I met a few lawyers in the Bay Area and said, if you wanted to practice in the Bay Area, it's better for you to go to Hastings. There'll be more opportunities for you. And so that's how I decided to go to Hastings. It was 3 more years of mom and dad helping me and learning and growing as a person, living in an urban environment. And I loved my time at Hastings. I've made lifelong friends. And, you know, law school was great as well, a little bit. But it was the relationships that I built at Hastings that I still have today that were the best part of that experience. So that's how I got to law school.
All right. And what did you do after law school?
Well, actually, during law school was some of the better experiences, I'll have to admit. I worked for a judge down in Los Angeles for a summer, Judge Hiroshige, who was also a Hastings alumnus. And one of the things he did was he hired students from Hastings to work for him. It was his way of giving back, and I was one of the students that he selected. And then my second summer, I worked at the district attorney's office as a certified law clerk, and that was eye-opening. I got to try 2 jury trials, and those were the only jury trials I've had since. Even after over 15 years of practicing law, I have not had a jury trial since. One time came close in private practice, but the case settled. And it, you know, outside of that, it's very, as you know, it's very rare for trials to actually, civil trials to actually go to jury trial. But that was a great experience. You know, the opportunity to be in court almost every day and to see what it's like firsthand was amazing. And then after graduating from law school, I had a series of jobs. I worked for the federal government for a little while. I wanted to get a broad experience in my life of everything. So I had a job working for the federal government at the Small Business Administration Disaster Assistance Office, helping victims of disasters. In the federal government level, everything has to go through a lawyer for approval. So I basically approved a lot of what the office was doing, myself and a whole lot of other lawyers. Was very bored of that work, as you can imagine. Went to a real estate law firm, one of the state's largest real estate law firms, and that was eye-opening as well, because although they worked me really hard, I got to learn a lot. It was a great learning experience with some very good mentors, and that was probably one of the more important things out of the job, was to have experienced lawyers show me the way and mentor me and guide me. And then from there, my dad, again, came back into the picture and said, you know, why are you busting your butt working all these hours, making someone else wealthy? Why don't you consider coming back to the family business? You know, work with me here, and if you like it, I'll give it to you. Like, I want to retire. I don't want to sell the business. I want to pass it on. And at that point, my sister was a doctor already. Kind of weird story, but she went to college wanting to be a lawyer, and in her last year decided to go to medical school.
And what was
yeah, so we kind of switched places.
What was the family
I'm sorry?
business?
So my father has a couple of different businesses. My mom and dad had several businesses. The 2 large ones were a manufacturing company in Silicon Valley, in Alameda County. We make equipment for the semiconductor and flat panel and solar industries. And then we also have a real estate business where we own and operate about 400,000 square feet of commercial property, mostly in Alameda County as well. So I was running both businesses simultaneously, and on the side, a very small law practice, which was why I decided to, at that point, get more engaged with the Alameda County Bar Association. I think this was about 2007 or so when I was on the barristers committee and got more active because I realized I still needed to be a lawyer.
And so did that work? Was that a helpful thing to join the barristers? And
Absolutely. I remember, again, mentorship being so important, meeting so many, the networking was the best part of it. I being, you know, a lawyer on the side, especially someone who didn't know everything as a young lawyer, it was important to be able to call on people and say, how do you handle the situation? What's the best approach? Especially when you have conflicts. You're not sure how to keep your client out of trouble, but also how to keep yourself out of trouble. And so having those more experienced voices in the room really, really makes it easier to come up with the right solution. Like I said, the mentorship aspect of any organization, especially at the ACBA, is crucial to developing your skills as a lawyer. And you gotta be proactive about it. You can't just join, pay your dues, and expect all these people to come calling you and asking if you have problems. You know, you pay your dues, you you get involved. That way you meet more people, both colleagues of the same level and senior attorneys. And when you meet them, get to know them, right? I got to know a lot of judges and senior attorneys during that time. And then be proactive about calling them, about sitting down on not.
Phong, I just lost you.
I think you froze there. I don't know if it's my computer or yours. We're back on. This is 2020, and you know, as long as a fly doesn't fall in your head, we're good.
Oh, it was a good debate.
And
But all right,
in
let's not even go there. Okay.
In the event this is watching future years and you don't understand that reference, we just had a debate last night with the vice presidential candidates, and a fly stole the show.
Yes.
Google it if this is 5 years from now.
Okay, so you met a lot of judges, you were saying.
And senior attorneys. It was the senior attorneys who actually gave me more advice than the judges. The judges tend to be a little bit more reserved in how they give advice, which is expected.
Right, that's right. So how did you end up running for office? How did that transition happen?
I was always involved politically. I had always helped good people get elected. It was my personal belief that government functions well when we have good people in office. And what I had done, so in addition to being a lawyer and running the family business, I also taught real estate economic courses, real estate management courses for 5 years at a community college, 4 to 5 years. And when the Great Recession hit back in 2009, I felt like it was my duty to give back in some way. I wanted to give back. And having these legal skills, especially in real estate, I said, well, why don't I help form a clinic to help people who are suffering through this time? And so a group of friends and I, through various nonprofit organizations, sat down and met with Elizabeth Hom from the ACBA at that time, who was running the legal clinics. And we said, Elizabeth, we'd like to work with the Bar Association. We have a bunch of volunteer lawyers like myself, and create this clinic in Oakland, because we thought the need was greatest there, to help people who were losing their homes. And certainly she got on board right away, and we established the clinic. And when I got into it and started helping people, we realized, you know, and this is going to sound a little political, but what had happened was people's home values had dropped about 50%, going from $800,000 on average to $400,000. Now, in property tax terms, that's about $400 a month difference, right? Which can be very helpful in helping someone pay their mortgage. And the assessor is responsible for valuing properties. And when we would call the assessor's office back in 2009, they would say there's nothing they can do right then and there, that we would have to file an appeal. So I would help people with their appeal paperwork. They would file their appeal, and the appeal would go through its process. It would take over 2 years. There was just a huge backlog. It would take over 2 years. My wife just walked by if she wants to say hi, who's also a member of the ACBA. I'll let her decide if she wants to come on the screen or not. Right. And here's my daughter.
Hi.
There you go. Former ACBA president Stephanie Sato right there.
Hi, Stephanie.
And Lizzie.
Hi.
So this is being recorded, so I don't want to take up too much of the people's time. But so we would have this issue with the assessor not being able to process this huge amount of appeals. And unfortunately, during those 2 years that it would take, most of the people we worked with ended up losing their homes. And I always said, you know, I think we can do it better. I think there can be something better done to help people, especially during a time of need or a crisis, like the Great Recession. But I was politically involved enough to know that you don't challenge a county-wide elected official who's an incumbent and expect to easily win.
Right.
So I said, you know what? I'm young. At that point, I was in my early 30s. There's plenty of time for government service later in my life. I'll just keep working on my career. And if the job ever opened up, I'll run for it. Well, lo and behold, fast forward to 2018, I'm sitting in my office down in Newark, California. For those who don't know, that's in the southern part of our county. I get a phone call from someone who's inside the assessor's office and says, you know, the assessor decided not to run. And this is the last day to file. It's 3 p.m.
Of course it
This
is.
is 3 p.m. on the very last day to file. Filing deadline's 5 p.m. and you have to go to Oakland to file. So like most or all smart married men, I do what we do, and I called my wife. And, you know, my wife just said, drive to Oakland. There's nothing to talk about if you don't get your name on the ballot. Get your name on the ballot and we'll talk about it afterwards.
Right.
So, I've been in the political process long enough to know what it takes to get on the ballot. I knew I had to get signatures. I knew I had to pay a filing fee. So I grabbed my checkbook, started driving to Oakland, started calling my friends who I knew were in and around Oakland because I needed signatures. So I asked them to meet me at the courthouse, Renee C. Davidson Courthouse, to meet me there in an hour at 4 o'clock, which was how long it would take me to get from Newark to Oakland in rush hour traffic.
Right.
When I got to the courthouse, 10 of my friends were there waiting for me. I ran into the courthouse, started the paperwork. They got the signature pages, started running around downtown Oakland collecting signatures on my behalf. By 4:45, we had the signatures we needed. I finished the paperwork. And because I did not know I was going to be a candidate, I had to write a personal check for the fee and the ballot statement fee, which was $27,000.
Ouch.
It was $27,000 per cycle, so I had to pay a $27,000 check right then and there. I didn't tell Stephanie about that till later that night.
That's smart, I think.
Yeah. And I was on the ballot. I was a first-time candidate, and I was off to go. And I wrote my ballot statement at 4:45 when the paperwork was done. I wrote it in 10 minutes.
Probably your best work, yes.
So
And
that's how I became a candidate.
and so how's it been? You've been in that role now for over a year, right?
Yeah, almost 2 years now.
It's 2 years.
It's been an amazing process. I can't thank the people of Alameda County enough for giving me the opportunity to serve in this way. And, you know, going back to what I said about what happened in the Great Recession, we're about to see that again. We're seeing a lot of businesses hurt. So we're being proactive about it. I've started a process where we're talking to businesses that have been closed to talk about their assessment. I just had a conversation with some movie theater owners who have not been allowed to open. So internally, we're trying to figure out how do we value their equipment, their projectors, their screens. I mean, movie theaters have millions of dollars of equipment that they pay property taxes on every year, right? That projector, that screen, every year they pay 1% in property taxes. So how do I value something that they have not been able to use for 8 months out of the year? And somehow the new guy for the State Assessors Association got tasked with the responsibility for figuring it out for the whole state. You know, it's kind of interesting how the new guy gets picked on to do everything.
Fine old tradition in many.
Absolutely right. The guys who've been doing it for 40 years, who've been doing it longer than I've been alive, said, we don't know how to do this, so why don't you figure it out, kid? So I've been meeting with my staff. We have regular weekly meetings to discuss this and figure out, all right, what's the best process? But not just for theaters. We're going to have to expand this to fitness locations. Think about, 24-hour fitness who's been closed, yoga studios who've been closed. It's just not right. And we got to figure out a way to get this right so that way they stay in business. So I came into office at the right time, right?
Yeah, although I
Who could have
imagine
predicted
you're
this?
a little squished, right? Because I imagine that the county wants to optimize its collections, and your agenda is to care, right, or be compassionate. That's a balance.
It is a balance because, the county, the revenues that come in for property taxes aren't just for the county. 42% of the revenue that comes in property taxes goes to the schools. The school districts get 42% of the revenue.
Mm,
We get over $3 billion of property taxes in Alameda County. So you can imagine how hurt the schools will be when there's a reduction in the entire property tax roll. And then I want to say about 18% go to the cities and 15% go to the county.
hmm.
But I don't see myself as a revenue earner. It's not my job just to generate revenue. It's my job to properly value uh, property, and from that value, property taxes are generated. But the ultimate, the end of getting the dollar amount is not my job, right? It's my job to do this right and get the right value first and foremost. So, yeah, no one expected a pandemic. We knew that there was a looming recession possibly because just economic cycles. We thought, oh, it might be a mild recession was the prediction. When I came into office, everyone had predicted a mild recession to come. No one expected a pandemic that just upended everything. And so, I'm up for the challenge. It is a challenge because we've never been through this before. And I depend on my friends who are members of the Bar Association, who are state and local tax attorneys, who I occasionally call on and say, what do you think about this? Right? How do you read this statute? Right? As far as whether we can go back in time. Like there are so many legal issues. And being a lawyer in this office really helps. The skills I learned in law school as far as how to read statutes, how to look at case law, and how to distinguish certain case laws to apply to this specific situation really help. And I'm grateful for that education I got. And I'm grateful for my friends who also practice this area of law and who I can turn to just for advice.
So, Phong, before you go, I want to ask you one last question. I want to ask you to tell us the story of how you met your amazing wife, Stephanie Sato.
So for those who don't know my wife, she is a former president for the Alameda County Bar Association. And it was, I want to say, I can't remember exactly what year it was. It was probably 2009, 2008, 2009, maybe. I'm going to sound really bad here because I don't remember the exact date and year that we met, but I was part of the barristers, and she eventually became part of the barristers committee too, but it was right before she came on as a member of the barristers committee. There was a social event that the barristers committee was hosting at Kimball's, which was a bar in downtown Oakland at Jack London Square. And it was about 4:30, 5 o'clock. I was down in my office in Newark. And I remember thinking, I don't want to drive up in traffic to go to this event. And it was a long day. I didn't see clients that day, so I was dressed down very casually. I think I was wearing a plaid shirt and jeans that day to work. And I was like, I'm gonna skip out on this event. And a couple of the barristers committee members called me and said, hey, you showing up? I was like, no, I'm tired. It's a long drive. It'll take me an hour to get up there. And they kept saying, no, come on, you got to come up. It's, you helped organize this event. You got to come. I'm just like, oh, fine, I'll go. All right. I felt bad. They guilted me into it. So I drove up there, and I was watching the game. It was a basketball event. There was a NBA Finals game, and all of a sudden I see someone out of the corner of my eye, and she was there with her friends, and it was Stephanie who, and I can't remember which barristers committee member it was. It was one of them who had introduced us that night, and I didn't think much about it. And I don't think we talked again for many months when we saw each other at the barristers committee. I like to joke that, she couldn't keep her eyes off me. She'll tell you a different story.
Yeah.
But that's how we first met. And some months later, I can't remember how long it was later, we became friends. And we would talk about basketball. That was kind of our common interest. And for probably 2 years when we were on Barristers together, it was just emails. I didn't go to too many events after that. I got very busy with work. But I would go to barristers meetings. And so we would just chat, send emails to each other about basketball.
Hmm.
And that's how it started. And then some years later, we ended up dating. Uh, we went out on our first date and it went from there. But so I credit and blame the ACBA.
We take all of the credit. We do, absolutely.
So, joining the Bar Association helps you find mentors and friends and possibly a spouse.
I think that it's going to be our new catchphrase on our outreach material, on our newsletter. Um, Phong, thank you so much. I
You're
really
welcome, and thank you
appreciate
for inviting me here today. And let me just put out one more plug out there. And
Please.
I want to thank Tiela and the Bar Association for helping me with my job. What we worked on together this past year was a legal clinic to help people with home transfers. Since I became assessor, even before I was assessor, there were a lot of people with questions about what happens when they pass on their home to their children or grandchildren. What happens with the property taxes? And that's always a huge deal. We're in a situation where there are a generation, the boomer generation, that are retired or retiring and looking at estate planning and trying to figure out what they do, not wanting to lose their home, keeping the family home in the family, especially in communities like Oakland and minority communities where they don't have the social system to help them figure all this out. And we're here to help them. And I'm so grateful to the ACBA for partnering with my office and willing to do the hard work and getting the volunteers to help these people who are in tremendous need of this service. So thank you for saying yes right away and for putting the staff on it to make it happen. Couldn't have done it without you. It's the example of just what the Bar Association does to help the community and to make our community a better place, not just for lawyers, but for everyone.
And it's been an honor to be able to work with you on that project. And I'm imagining there will be more to come in the future as the unknowns keep coming. So we'll be ready for it, and we're delighted to be partners with you. So thank you so much, Fong. We really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Take
Thank
care.
you very much.
All right. Bye.